Vince and them showed up to, Shane and WWF showed up in Panama City unannounced. Nobody knew it. And I rode with the company. Sting, Luger, Goldberg is who I hung out with. Dallas Pages. We hung with everybody. So all the guys that were late were showing up to Panama City, the Stars, and we're late. And all of a sudden I noticed the trucks are there. And I go, hey guys, what is that? And those boys knew more than I knew. They look and go, oh shit. And it was the WWF trucks. Right. And we were like, so we all just separated and went to the people we know to see what was going on. And before we could even get anything found out, they were like, hey, Shane McMahon's got a meeting and right in this room in 2 minutes. So we all get in the room and the whole company was in this kind of a small room. But everybody was in there, everybody. And Shane goes, he walked in and goes, my name's Shane McMahon. He goes, we own World Championship Wrestling. We want to let you guys know we are going to keep some wrestlers. We're going to fire some wrestlers. We're going to keep some referees. We're going to fire some referees. We're going to keep some office staff. We're going to fire some office staff. And he goes, so good luck. And about half the guys went. And I looked at Luger, and Luger wasn't doing this, so I didn't. I did what Luger did. And Luger didn't do that, so I didn't do it. And that after that meeting, of course, it kind of whittled down that you needed to be on that show that night, obviously. And me and Lex wasn't on it. And I was like, and we were totally buff. I was like, what? So I went and got my car, depressed, like, you got to be kidding me. I can't believe we're on the show. We're not going to make it. I started to leave, and here's Lex Luger running to me. I'm like, this is either bad or good. So I said, what's up, bro? He goes, we're on the show. We're on the show. So I was like, all right. So I get my bags back out, go back in. And it was an interview. I've never even seen what I'm telling you about right now. But on that show that Vince talked in Cleveland to Shane McMahon in Panama City, on that show, I'm on an interview on that show, but it was pre-taped and I've never seen it. So I was heading home from that show from Panama City, depressed as hell. And my phone rings. It's my dad. And he goes, hey man, he goes, are you watching the show? And I go, nah, so I'm heading home, man. I'm just depressed, kind of down. You know, he goes, I know, man. He goes, but listen, I got some good news for you. I said, what? He goes, well, I'm watching the show and Vince and him are talking, and Vince is in Cleveland and da, da, da. I go, okay. He goes, well, he mentioned 5 names and you were one of the 5. And I went, what? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, and this is my dad saying it, but he goes, now I'm not just saying this. He goes, but you got the second biggest pop. And I went, really? And he went, yeah. So I didn't quite know how big that was. And then I talked to Lex and Sting, and they were like, bro, Vince McMahon just does not say your name. So if he said your name, you're in. He goes, I'm telling you. So the perception was I was fine, no problems. Went to wrestling school that they want us to go to, which I thought was ridiculous, but I didn't say a word. I signed a 90% cut in pay contract, making $175,000 a year. And I had to sell everything, my house, I was still making great money, but I couldn't afford what I was living like, you know? So there went the motorcycles, the cars, the house, you know, all that went. And then 2 weeks later, you know, there I went, which again set another record from being the only professional wrestler in the history of time to be main event 1 week and fired the next.
There at the end, like, were you there for the final Nitro?
No, I didn't go.
There you go. But you were under contract.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
I didn't go. When I heard about what was going to go down, I was like, I'm not going to be a part of this. I don't want to be a part of it. I talked to my brother about it. I said, you go down, man, blah, blah, blah. Do your thing, this, that, and the other. I'm not going. Because I feel as though I felt as though we had been hoodwinked, because at one time we were the winning team, man. And it seemed like everything was sabotaged from within. And now, that's just how I looked at it. I took it very personal. So I was like, I'm not going to be a part of this schmoz, like the other guys and came in and did a hostile takeover, and make us all look like chicken shit, which I knew they were going to do anyway. And so I took my ticket. I took my ticket that I was supposed to fly down to Florida or wherever it was. And I went down the street to Continental Airways office. It was a Continental ticket. And I turned the ticket into 2 tickets. And I called my buddy that works for the Nevada Athletic Commission. And I said, hey, brother, I'm coming in town. I said, I'm going to come to Vegas. I'm just changing my ticket and coming to Vegas. And I changed in 2 tickets because a buddy of mine's coming with me. And I was like, hey, man, who is that? Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis are fighting for the heavyweight title this weekend. Can you hook me up? He said, yes. So that's where I was. I was in Vegas watching Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis fight for the heavyweight title and having a good time in Vegas. That's where I was.
Did they contact you to go to WWE after WCW?
Yeah, they did, but I was like, I wasn't interested.
So right after WCW gets sold, and the way I found out it was getting sold is I'm watching it live just like everybody else.
Wow.
And back then, texting was not what it is now. So everybody's trying to call everybody. You had cell phones, but nobody's really texting. Right. And I'm trying to call Hugh, and I'm trying to call Chavo, and I'm trying to get the lay of the land and figure out what in the world's going on, man. I'm sitting at home waiting on them to call me back up and watching TV like everyone else. I'm going, why Shane McMahon? I couldn't process it. It was just too much. And not long after that happened, about 2 weeks goes by, and we're all talking to each other and just not sure what to do. We're all kind of sitting in limbo. And I got a call from Johnny Ace. And Johnny Ace calls me up. And at that point, Johnny Ace had come in. He started out as a finish guy to help the bookers and putting together matches. And then they made him sort of the vice president of talent relations just right there towards the end. And he very quickly was able to kind of parlay that into that version, working with very closely with JR with WWE of bringing in the new talent. And he was sort of the liaison between the WWE and the WCW talent that they were interested in. So he calls me up and I answer the phone and he goes, Les. I go, yeah, Johnny. He goes, so I got good news and I got bad news. I said, well, I'm a bad news first guy kind of guy, Johnny. What you got? He goes, well, the bad news is Vince is only interested in 24 guys from WCW. Okay, Johnny, what's the good news? Good news is you're one of them. All right, that's great. Okay, well, what am I going to do? Well, just sit tight and I'll call you back. So I sit tight for about another week. Week goes by, he calls me back.
No, you're getting your WCW check though this whole time?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, I even asked him, I said, so what's going to happen? I said, am I signing a WWE contract? Do I need? He goes, for right now, you'll just keep getting paid like you're getting paid. And you'll keep getting that WCW check. I said, okay. So then he calls me up in matter of fact, there's an overlap period there where I'm getting a WWE check and a WCW check for the same amount every week. Nice. So, or every 2 weeks or whatever. So that was nice. But very quickly I get a call, probably 3 weeks after that. And he goes, Lash. And I go, yeah. He goes, by the way, this was a Friday before the Monday that my contract was going to roll over. And he calls me up and he goes, Vince wants you to sign a new WWE contract. Okay, no big deal, Johnny. As long as I can pay my bills and live my dream, man, I'm not greedy, and I'm not. He goes, well, look, you need to understand that the contracts in WWE are structured different than WCW. And what he's referring to is that in WWE, your downside was far lower, but you got residuals and you got draws. And I'm going to be honest with you, by the way, to this day, I'm still not sure how that works because I've never been under that type of contract before.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure how the draws work and the residuals work and everything else, but you got all this extra money off of the shows that you worked. In WCW, man, you got a set salary. And outside of merchandising, you got nothing additional on top of that. You didn't get bonuses for pay-per-views. You didn't get anything like that.
Were you there at the end of Nitro?
Yeah, I was at the last.
WCW. You were there.
Mhm.
Yeah. What was that like the week before? I mean, I've had like Buff Bagwell on. I've had Stevie Ray. I've had Bill DeMott. I've had Lash LaRue. So, just everyone pretty much tells the same story. Let me hear your story. What was it like the last week of WCW?
So remember, at the time I was 19, right? And then they had the last Nitro in Panama City Beach, Florida, right? So my friends find out this information. It's like, oh, bro, we're gonna go down a week early and come down with us, and party our balls off all week. So that being 19 years old, that was me.
Oh yeah.
Oh snap! My boys are coming down. So that whole week was kind of like spring break week for me and my boys. So every night, whatever, having fun.
Right.
And I show up to Nitro on that Monday. And it, like you probably heard the story, we walk in and I'm like, and we just hear news that WWE bought WCW like a day or two before or that week. And I was like, no way. Like really, just Bischoff was just talking about buying it last week. And then I didn't believe it, and I'm like kind of hungover the whole week, so I've been walking into the hotel, I guess. It wasn't an arena, but and they had all the WWE signage everywhere. And it's like, oh shit, this is real. And then all the stories when we had the talent meeting, Shane walks in, Bruce Pritchard walks in, Briscoe walks in. I'm like, oh snap, this is crazy, and then we had the match. And then I got really excited, because I found out that they picked up my contract.
Okay.
And then watching the show, because I always like to sneak out in the crowd and watch it live, and seeing the angle that was going on, Vince McMahon versus Shane McMahon, I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. Oh, man, This is really, really good. And I'm going to get to be a part of it. I'm like, oh, man, this is awesome. This is crazy. And then when I go to the back, I'm so young and dumb. I don't understand what happened, but a lot of people just lost their jobs. And in the back, everybody's crying, hugging. I'm like, and I realized, kind of hit me with reality about people losing their jobs. And I was like, oh crap. I was excited about the wrestling part. I got to perform on that last Nitro, had a really fun match with the other guys. And then watching the show, getting excited about the angle, then coming back, I was like, oh crap, this company just went out of business and all these people just lost their jobs, so it's kind of crazy time.
Were you in WCW till the very end?
Yes, I was. And it was a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion. There's too many people with their hand in the pot. Who wants to do this? Who wants to do that? Ultimately, it was sold, and there was a whole other story that is just. It should have just stayed the way it was. WCW on TBS, the Superstation. Some of us would still be wrestling on that place. You know what I mean? So it's sad that it disappeared.
Were you there at the last Nitro?
I was not there at the last Nitro, but I watched on TV, and it was just sad to see because I love that place and just everything about it. And you put your heart and soul into it, and you're like, okay, I mean, this run is over. Now, where do you go?
So what was it like towards the end of WCW? You hear stories, you hear rumblings, you don't know. What did you actually know and what actually happened with you?
We knew, we were basically told by the lawyers, they don't want us. AOL was going to buy it, Coca-Cola was going to buy it, this company was going to buy it. So there was always rumblings about the company being sold. The bigger part for me was, and I got trainings, that's not my business. I'm not an office guy. What was happening for me was more opportunities, the Misfits, and then build them up, becoming the Hugh Morris that I wanted to become, getting those title runs and opportunities to literally now, instead of working against Hogan years before, standing side to side with the biggest names in the business, baby faces, all this stuff. So business wise for me, it couldn't have been any better. But you knew something was going to happen. So there was a lot of people on edge, but there was no matter what stories you hear, the fact was half of those boys were under guaranteed money and they could care less if the company got sold or not. It was everybody else trying to figure out, where do I go from here? You know, do I have a future somewhere else? That kind of stuff. So I wasn't uptight about it until the day we got to Panama City. And, you know, you saw all the WWE production this way. And if you were part of WCW at the time, everybody was always trying to stir the pot. So you didn't know what signs were real. And it's just more, it was more WCW BS. But this one was for real, because then you saw the WWE production truck. And then you saw, and people going, oh, and then catering was very subdued. And everything was and all of a sudden they called for the meeting, which became like a natural thing after a while. All talent meeting, in walks Bruce Pritchard, Pat Patterson, Jerry Briscoe, and Shane McMahon. You could have heard a pin drop. And they said, okay, boys, it's true. We're taking over and we're going live on Raw tonight. And blah, blah, blah. And some of you will be here and some of you will be notified. And I got approached by Shane McMahon, who said, we want you to start the night off dark. You're the opening dark match. He goes, don't read into it. He goes, go out there and do what you've been doing this whole time. He said, can you do that and start the night off? Yeah. Go out, dark match. Place was hot because they didn't know that WWF was behind the scenes, right? The fans were just going to get the Panama City show. So go out and do that. You know, it got complimented and, you know, they were all professional. But then I was sitting there at the end watching the rest of the show, and now the clamorings are starting and guys are, F this, I don't need this, I'm getting paid. And other younger guys going, well, I don't know anything else. And, you know, what am I going to do? And there definitely was an opportunity to go and kiss butt and introduce yourself. It was business that night. So I was trying to figure out, do I go back to Japan or what do I do? And, you know, I was fortunate enough to get a phone call 2 days later. But that time was it was edgy because you saw all these guys you've been on the road with for 6-7 years. And now some were scrambling, some were cocky, some knew they had burnt bridges and weren't going to get an opportunity again. So it was a lot of emotions, a lot of things. But at the end of the night, you knew at the end of that night, you weren't going to see a lot of these people again.
And then my 2-year contract ran out, and I basically was still on the contract to do by appearance at the time. And Orndorff was pushing really hard for me to come on as a coach at the power plant. And that was already set in motion, but it hadn't been finalized. And right about that time, I remember Terry Taylor calling me and saying, we had been bought out. It's March of 2001, I believe. And all of a sudden, and everybody knows the story from there. So,
yeah. But before that, we're wrestling in Jacksonville on a pay-per-view. It was a Greed pay-per-view, last pay-per-view WCW ever had. I wrestled Jason Jett. You should have watched that match.
I've seen that before.
That was a 15-minute barn burner. We tore the house down.
What a terrible pay-per-view name, Greed. Am I right? Anyway.
Yeah, you know, well, that was WCW back then. I mean, you know, you might have been thinking it was terrible, but there wasn't nothing that was going to get done about it. So it was like you just work with what you had. You know what I mean? Just kind of like with the Queevy character. You know, a lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people respected it. A lot of people thought it was crap. You know, they half-assed it. You know, I did the best with what they give me and what I could do with it. So me and Jason Jett, we tear the house down on Greed. But before we get to the match, I'm in the car with the guy, Ross Foreman. I don't know if you know Ross Foreman or not.
No.
So I was good buddies with Ross. He was good friends with Kevin Nash. That's how I became friends with Kevin Nash, actually. And I used to travel with Kevin a little bit. But so Kevin calls while we're driving to Jacksonville. And I wasn't even booked on the show, but we were going down to watch some spring training games because we knew some of the baseball players with the, you know, like Steve Klein that pitched for the Cardinals. And, you know, I knew Tony La Russa and a few of the guys. Sean Casey had played for the Reds. So we went down to watch some baseball games, and we were just going to go to the show because we were down there anyway. So when I was at the driving to the show, I wasn't even booked on a pay-per-view, but they booked me after I got there. So Kevin calls and goes, "Hey, Vince just bought the company," and it kind of caught me off guard because I'm thinking, well, Eric, why would Vince Russo buy the company? I thought Eric was buying it, but he just said Vince, and I work with Vince Russo, so that's the first name I thought of. So I'm like, I said, I'm confused, man. I don't understand what's going on here. Like Vince Russo is buying the company. I thought Eric already owned it. He's like, no, Vince McMahon. And I was like, Vince McMahon? How? I thought Eric already owned the company. Like I was just thrown off because, I'm promised this stuff from Eric Bischoff, which he had nothing to do with, as far as like him getting the company bought out from under him. I mean, I don't really know what happened, but it just, I was kind of, I had so many thoughts going through my head, like shit, like Eric just promised me all this stuff. Now Vince McMahon buys the company, like it's going to be WWE. Like what's going on here? Like it just seemed like it wasn't possible, So then we go to the pay-per-view and no one's saying nothing. Kevin told us not to say nothing about it because I don't think anybody knew. So we go to the show, me and Ross, and we're like, hey, does anybody say anything about anything? And he's like, no. And I'm like, I didn't even really know if it was true or not because no one said a word that I heard at that pay-per-view on the Sunday. So after the pay-per-view, everything's normal. We leave, we're driving to Panama City from Jacksonville. We get a hotel, we wake up, we work out or do whatever, just like we always done. Then we go to the arena because I'm booked on a Nitro. So of course I'm driving. We get to the show. We walk in, we see Pat Patterson, we see Shane McMahon, we see all, and we're like, what in the heck is going on? Like, holy crap, Kevin wasn't lying. We're like, and then it started sinking in. We're like, man, and I didn't know what to think then either because I'm thinking all this talent, like what's going to happen with everybody? That was the first thing I thought of, and I'm thinking, I'm nobody. I'm just getting on TV. I'm trying to make a name for myself. And here I am. Now I'm mixed up with WWE, which I was trying to be positive about. I'm like, man, there's a lot of talent. Maybe we could do something with this. But, I didn't really know what to think. Honestly, I had so much stuff running through my head.
True. Talk to me about the last Nitro. Like, what was it like for you? Who would you talk to? Did you get offered anything? Like, what was the actual last Nitro experience like for you?
Yeah. So the last Nitro, it was very odd. I'm sure you've heard before, but we walk in and there's a sign that says WCW this way, WWE this way, and I thought it was a rib. So I was like, what? Who did this? Who did this nonsense? Like just trying to figure out who did it. But then whenever they all showed up in catering and we had a meeting in there and it became real whenever you seen them sitting there, it's like, okay, like this is real. My first, I was scared to death, man, because I was so young and, I finally had made it. And I was like, man, what does this mean? Like I'm a smaller guy because define the odds of making it being, 140, 150 pounds at that point. I was like, shit, man, like WWE's the land of the giants. Like, are they going to take the cruiserweights there? Like, what is this? And I was on the last show. So I worked that night. That made me a little bit more comfortable being on the show because I knew I figured if you're not on the show, it's probably bad. Or if I would have got pulled off the show, that's probably bad news. But, we did the show. They didn't really give us much information. They just said that we'll be contacting you. And, I was flying home the next day. Like everybody pretty much said their goodbyes that night and we didn't know if we'd see each other again. And I was like, shit, okay. So I'm flying home. I'm going, well, I got a house. I got all this shit that I bought because, 18, 19 years old. It's what you do. You buy the cool shit. And I was like, how am I going to pay for this stuff? Like if I get fired. But luckily, they did roll my contract over and I ended up in HWA, for a few months till I got pulled up to TV.
And the way that WCW showed off their cruiserweight division was a lot different than the way the WWF did. WCW, that was a big part of their show. It felt like WWE cruiserweights are kind of there to put the bigger guys over. But yeah, that was probably scary for you as well. The fact that you didn't even know how they were going to treat the cruiserweights when they brought them over.
Yeah, you know, especially because we were the go-to guys in WCW. I felt like we'd established ourselves. Me, Shane, you know, and Evan and the Young Dragons. It was like if they needed a hot segment, entertaining segment, you know, Johnny Ace would always come to us and go, "Hey kids, like, you know, you got 10 minutes. Like, we need entertainment. Do whatever you got to do. You know, like give us a car crash, whatever you could do." So I felt like we had established, you know, we'd arrived, you know, in WCW, and I just didn't know what, you know, what it looked like.